the game in Columbus, because that's the one we were all watching. The two biggest brand names, but I predicted that Ohio State would flex and just dominate this game. I was very wrong. Notre Dame hung in most of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State gutted it out, basically.
Yep.
And how do you feel about this game? Because I'm gonna do the old talk radio trick of, is this team good or does this team suck? And I don't know the answer to it.
Does Ohio State suck, or does it?
Suck is the wrong word.
No, suck is the word I used. I used it last year, and Ralph Russo got mad at me. Remember?
Oh, I know. But is Ohio State less than what we thought they were, or is Notre Dame just maybe better than we thought?
I think it's possible that both of those things could be true. I mean, what do we think Ohio State was coming into the game? The only team in college football outside of Georgia that has a chance against Alabama on a college football playoff field. The thing that I would hang my hat on if I were an Ohio State fan is that is the exact type of game that they lost last year twice. The type of game where they couldn't just throw the ball around the field at will. And they took a top 5 team, whether or not you think Notre Dame is a top 5 team or not, and outgutted them in the trenches and ran the ball down their throat. And I think held them to less
than that was the most impressive thing to me at the end.
I mean, they won games like Ohio State won games for the majority of the last decade. And it was the type of way that you have to win games when you're facing really good teams. So, I don't know if this is like a good context conversation for how good is Ohio State, how good is Notre Dame. But I think from a win standpoint, the fact that it was the opposite of the way things went for Ohio State last year in the games that they couldn't, capitalize on, I think is a very encouraging thing, especially considering the fact that they lost their best offensive weapon outside of CJ Stroud in that game.
Yeah. And Jackson Smith-Njigba tried to come back at the beginning of the second half, and it didn't look like he was moving very well. So we'll see what that situation, where that goes. They had a young receiver who played very well. They had some guys that maybe you didn't think were going to be the big contributors in this game who stepped up.
Yeah, and I mean, you had a former walk-on receiver who was outside of the top 1,000 in his rankings catch the go-ahead touchdown in the third quarter. Didn't have that. Was it the third or the fourth quarter even? I can't even remember, but it was like did not have walk-on receiver makes biggest play for Ohio State on my bingo card.
No.
But the thing that I will say is in this world of college football, do you want a team that can throw the ball around and only can do that and score 50 points when things are working, but has a hard time moving the ball on the ground when you're facing a team with similar talent? Or do you want a run-first team that throws the ball very well? And for whatever reason, Ryan Day has a tendency to continually fall in love with throwing the ball first, which is something that I think Ohio State fans probably like about him when it's working. But in games like this, it's hard to watch. So, when Ohio State needed to, they got the ball inside their own 10-yard line and went 14 plays and 95 yards, took 7 minutes off the clock, and extended their lead to 21-10 and ended the game with 4 minutes and 51 seconds left in the half, or in the game, excuse me. And like that to me is the most encouraging thing, not to mention that their defense, which was atrocious for Ohio State standards last year, held Notre Dame to less than 75 yards of offense in the entire second half. So, I don't know how you view that, because people will say, well, Notre Dame's not that good, so Ohio State by default, who struggled with them and was losing at halftime, might not be that good. And I guess we'll find out later on if that's a true thing. But given where they were coming into the year, given what we know what they had to work on the offseason and what they were last year, losing Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think that beating a top 5 team at home the way that they did it with Jim Tressel in the house was both appropriate and encouraging.
So I was impressed with the defense. I thought they looked, you asked me the question, can you make a defense tougher in an offseason? They looked tougher.
Yeah, I mean, they looked like their defensive line was really getting in there.
Because that is a Notre Dame offensive line that will maul some people this year.
Yeah. I think that from a staying power situation, Ohio State puts themselves in a position where they probably don't face a better team than Notre Dame for the rest of the year. Maybe Michigan at the end.
Yeah, we'll see what Michigan turns out to be. We'll see what Michigan State turns out to be. But yeah, this Notre Dame team looks good. And that's the question I wanted to ask you. Now, Notre Dame has Clemson on the schedule still.
Mm-hmm.
Other than Clemson, they don't play anybody else that measures up to what they played tonight? Like they
That's
should
right.
be able to beat everybody else on their schedule but Clemson based on what we saw tonight.
I would think that would be the case, yes.
So
The thing with
I
Notre
was,
Dame that it stands out to me and always has is they didn't have a offensive skill position player that scares you. And I think when you play teams like Ohio State,
Michael Meyer, he scares
well, I mean,
you,
I
but
guess if you think a tight end skill, I mean, I was thinking more like running back who can hit a home run or a receiver that hits a home run. I don't know that the tight end, he's a great tight end, don't get me wrong, but he can't be the guy that
not
that is-
against a team like Ohio State,
that's
but
gonna- when
against
they-
most of the teams on their schedule, he can
Sure,
be
sure,
very
yeah.
scary.
And
Yeah.
I just feel like Ohio State just, out talented them on the outside. And like the funniest thing that you have to remember too is that a lot of the receivers that were out there catching all these passes were redshirt freshmen, sophomores, guys who aren't very experienced. So, when they get Jackson Smith and Jigba back and, kind of have their whole game plan at their fingertips, and maybe Ryan Day will continue to remember they can run the football. But here's the thing. If you beat a top 5 opponent by 1 or by 10 or by 5 or by 100,
See, I hear
is that
you're
good or
top
bad?
5. Nobody's a top 5 opponent now. It only matters what they're ranked at the end of the season. So what they're
about
ranked
this?
now is completely irrelevant.
Let me rephrase the ranking because I don't want to get caught up in semantics.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is probably firmly in that second tier, right?
Yes.
And if their second tier probably starts at team 4 to team 8.
Yeah.
So
and I
beating a
just said
team-
I just said I expect them to be a 10-2 team. So
So if they're a 10-2 team, I think that the spread and the way that we're accustomed to seeing Ohio State win games is by a lot. And I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to the idea that Ohio State had to win that game by 21 to feel good about it. Like if
Right.
you would have told me the defense clamps down, they won both sides of the trenches, they ran a 14-play, 100-yard drive for 7 seconds or 7 minutes with the game on the line, punched it in with less than 5 minutes left, and I would be like, oh, those are the exact games that Ohio State lost last year.
yeah. Yeah, this is what they needed to be.
So I would say that's a good win.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is what they needed to be. And the good thing about their schedule is they can now figure stuff
Autopilot.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can figure stuff out. They've been challenged. They've been hit in the mouth. One more Notre Dame thing. I like Tyler Buckner a lot. I think having a quarterback who can run for
Mhm.
Notre Dame, like you said, because they don't necessarily have a home run hitter at receiver. They don't have that back that truly scares you, but having some mobility and that makes a huge difference compared to Jack Cohn last year.
Huge. And there were a few plays that he got out of the pocket and, moved the sticks and, extended some plays that would have been dead a year ago. So, the thing that I think is most encouraging about Notre Dame is I was impressed with Marcus Freeman's temperament tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that, I saw Luke Fickell come into the Ohio Stadium, the second year he was at Cincinnati and lose 38-0 and completely melt in the heat of that. And Luke Fickell, I think, is probably considered now one of the best rising coaches in the sport.
Yeah, very good coach.
Like Marcus Freeman carried himself and had his team play like they had been there before. And as they amass more talent and as they get, further down the line of the build with his team and his players, I think they can be a very good football team. And I know that Notre Dame fans are just starving to win a game like this, to beat a team that's in the recruiting rankings Cool Kids Club.
Yeah.
But I thought that if I were a Notre Dame fan, I could go to bed tonight and be proud of that too.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's weird that he's 0-2 as a head coach, but they lost to a very good Oklahoma State team in the bowl game and a really, really good Ohio State team on Saturday night. So he will, I would say that the Marshall game next year will be the first win for Marcus Freeman as Notre Dame's coach, and it's going to happen.